Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have a fantastic show and we are going to cover many interesting areas. And we have Amit Goswami, who is a retired professor of theoretical physics and the author of this new book, Quantum Economics. So welcome, Dr. Goswami.
Great. Good to be here, CJ. It's wonderful.
So, I want to first start off the segment by understanding you and how you came about this work. Now, I think a lot of us were first introduced to you in What the Bleep, and since then, the whole idea of quantum physics and the realm of possibility and the whole idea that you create your own reality is now in the common vernacular. And I wanted to talk to you about, since you were one of the pioneers even talking about this area, how did you come up with these ideas?
Well, it was a long story, but I'll give you a synopsis. Um, I was a run-of-the-mill physicist. Believe it or not, it is true.
Uh-huh.
I did a branch of physics called theoretical nuclear physics,
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing good. I mean, I got promotions to full professor and all that, so it was working out fine. But I was not happy. So I go to this conference and I gave my talk, which should have made me quite happy. I think I did okay in that respect. But I was very unhappy because other people talked, and it always seemed to me that they're doing better and they're getting better questions and they're mingling more, getting more attention. And here I was not getting enough attention. And so the energy that flew through me that day, whole day, is jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed through night. Like 1 a.m., I'm at a party and all my antacids are gone. So I'm kind of disgusted with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I go outside. It just so happens that the outside is an ocean coast. And the ocean air, that cool breeze hits my face. And a thought comes, which is totally from the blue.
Mm-hmm.
The thought was, why do I live this way? Why do I live this unhappy way, this non integrated way between my work and my home and personal life? And I knew that I have to integrate. So that search for integration began a search for physics that will make me happy, led me to quantum physics and understanding the philosophy, which I never bothered when I was a graduate student. So I came back to all that and started to understand quantum physics. And amazing thing was that indeed quantum philosophy had much difficulty for many people. This is why they told us, professors told us, avoid the philosophy. Don't try to understand quantum physics. Other people are saying nobody understands quantum physics. So dare you not try.
Right.
But I was desperate, and I knew that I have to integrate quantum physics in my philosophy of life.
Huh.
So that eventually led to the solution, what's called quantum measurement problem. And the solution is so similar to the philosophy of what you call spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, my first inclination immediately was, hey, I have got the key to integrating science and spirituality. So
Mm-hmm.
my first book emphasizes that the most, integration of science and spirituality. I thought people will just love it and it will be just immediately, taken up by scientists as a wonderful accomplishment because it has now, integrated two so disparate fields. Nobody could ever expect that these fields will be integrated. They were so divided already.
Mm-hmm.
But here, there it was. Quantum physics integrates them because quantum philosophy is exactly what the philosophy of spirituality is all about.
Mm-hmm. And so, your personal life, were you a religious man, or what was your religion? Because you were saying that you were trying to integrate your personal life with then also this work life. What was your personal life that that you had?
Yeah, I suppose that question is natural. No, actually, I was a materialist by the time I got this idea that I need to integrate. So I was talking about more an integration of the physics I did had nothing, no relevance to my personal life. So it's an
Mm,
integration of my professional life was evolving around something which is totally meaningless in terms of what I need for personal growth, to be happy, to learn to love my wife, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, love my
Mm-hmm.
children.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't know what love is. I was
Mm.
so self-centered as a physicist because, what I found
Ah,
is that you work all the time.
right.
So I had no time to spend with wife, no time to spend with children. I took them totally for granted. Everybody existed serving me in the family.
Right. Right. Because you had
That's you.
you were true to your training, right? I mean, it's me, I'm separate. There are some things that I want to do. Everything else outside of me is another object. I mean, I'm doing it to the extreme of a scientific point of view, and these are all little variables that I need to control and manage, right?
Yeah, you summarized it very well. Everything was an object for the father of supporting me. That's
Right.
their job.
Yeah.
And so when the object was powerful, like my own mentor, then I was respectful. But he was also an object, make no mistake about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody existed for me only. I was the numero uno in my mind, no
Yeah.
question about it. So
Yeah.
when I say integration, I knew that this is not the right approach because it didn't make me happy. It
Mm.
made me instead very isolated, very
Mm.
insecure,
Right.
because I knew that if other people feel this way, oh my God, what a world we are living.
Right.
Everybody feels this isolated and nobody cares for anybody really deep down. So, what kind of a world is this?
Yeah. And I was
This is
actually, I would
what
say,
I
and I think you're not alone. If we're really, if all of us are truly honest, the vast majority of us are living in that same reality, right? Because we are raised under those same presumptions that everything is measurable, it's empirical, it's material. So we're all under the same hypnosis. So I think if we're truly honest, we're all disintegrated in some way, shape, or
in
form.
some way.
So why was quantum physics the answer for you?
Well, this is the thing. Quantum physics fundamentally says something about reality that physics community still, it's hush hush. Close the doors. Nobody must know this. This is the attitude of the entire physics community. It has been, quantum physics is 90 years old. Can you
Hmm.
imagine?
No.
90 years old.
Yeah.
And in all these 9 decades, we have held up the illusion that quantum worldview only holds for the submicroscopic world. It has no relevance to world at large, and we don't really have to worry about quantum physics and its conclusion for macro world where we live. This is the conclusion of Harvard, Princeton, all these 200 IQ people. They all have concluded that no, for the rest of the world, it is only Newtonian worldview, the machine view of human being. This is the correct one.
Right. Well, why do you think that is it because it's too scary to think of the other possibility that for 90 years people are hush hush? Why are
It,
they hiding this idea?
it is too scary because look at the idea. The idea is so simple. Quantum physics says, without any equivocation, without any scope for any argument, quantum physics says that there are two domains of reality, not one, space and time.
Hmm.
There is a domain of reality that is outside of space and time. We now have measured it. We have measurement, we have experiments saying that yes, there is indeed a domain where communication can be instantaneous. We call it non-locality. And then there is the space-time domain where instantaneous communication is impossible. All communication must be less than or at the speed of light. That's the maximum speed of communication.
Hmm.
This is space-time. But there is a domain which is called domain of potentiality, where quantum possibilities reside, where the speed is infinite. Communication is instantaneous. What does that mean? That domain is all one thing.
Yeah. And so
What do you know that is all one thing? Consciousness, of course, nothing else. And that's
yeah.
my discovery. Consciousness is one, it's the ground of being, and quantum possibilities, all quantum possibilities are possibilities of consciousness.
So do you think, because in your book, Quantum Economics, there's a chapter where you talk about, how did we arrive at this place? And I think you brought I was actually telling this to my 16-year-old son, and he's like, this is fascinating because he's in school, as you point out, and he's learning about kind of this Newtonian, materialistic science is what you call it. But basically, The ideas are that if you can't measure it, if you can't touch it, it doesn't exist. And so it's all, if our mind can observe it, if we can measure it, then it exists. But otherwise, these things don't exist. So,
But Switcher, here is the catch. Scientists change their point of view all the time. They're so slippery. Today, even measurability is no longer the issue. Because as I said to you, this other domain of reality is already measured. We now have a measurement criterion. This is the domain where communication is instantaneous. We have thousands upon thousands of measurements which are instantaneous communication. Non-local communication has been verified repeatedly.
and what are, and what, and when you start telling about those experiments, so you talk about telepathy, where there's one person who's thinking of one thing, and then like thinking about a drawing, and the other person on some other part of the world, which is non-local, is actually picking up the cue and doing the drawing that the other person across the world is thinking about. That's non-local communication, right?
But that's telepathy, and scientists object, and there is a little truth in that objection, which
Okay.
is still subjective.
Okay.
Thinking. How can we rely on thinking? Because
Right.
we think all kinds of things. True. But imagine this experiment, which has been done some 2 dozen times in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
The experiment is two subjects meditate together with the intention that they will communicate directly, instantly, without any exchange of signals. Direct communication. To prove that the communication really direct, the experimenters put them in separate electromagnetically impervious chambers. These are called Faraday chambers. Electromagnetic wave cannot go through the walls of these chambers.
Right. Okay.
So they're sitting and meditating with the intention that there will be non-local communication between them, instantaneous communication without signals. Their brains, both brains, are connected to individual EEG machines, electroencephalogram. One subject is shown light flashes. So the electroencephalogram picks up the brain waves, measured. From the brain waves, a signal can be extracted, and we get a good signal, of course, because light flashes are falling. Therefore, the brain is active. Interestingly, the other subject's EEG, other subject is not seeing any light flashes, but his or her EEG also picks up the same signal, and the EEG shows that in phase and in strength, virtually the same signal shows up in the other EEG.
Okay, so wait. Okay, so I just want to break that down. So just to break this down, because I am not a physicist.
Right.
I'm not good at science.
Okay.
So this proves non-local communication. So one, you emphasize that the rooms were actually magnetized.
Electromagnetically isolated.
Okay, so that means that there's not energy flowing back and forth.
Electrical energy can flow from one to the other.
Right. So there's nothing that's flowing energy between these two.
Not through space-time.
Right. So why? So where I got it. So that's why it's like I'm nullifying this idea of not through space-time, because that's not what's happening here.
No.
So then why is it instantaneous that when the light flashes in subject one, that subject two?
We cannot prove that it is instantaneous in a measurement way, but we can prove indirectly, because there is no way that electromagnetic interaction can go through from one subject to the other. Right. Therefore, it has to be outside of space and time, because inside of space and time, we can only think of electromagnetic signals to go from one to the other. There is just no other possibility. You can nitpick, but it's so hopeless. There is no other way that can communicate between the two, from brain to brain, showing the same electric potential from one brain to the other, because it's only electrical energy that is involved.
Okay, so when physicists hear this, traditional physicists are like, oh, let's not go there, because I don't know I can't even explain what's happening, so I don't want to go into the unexplainable. Is that what happens? Is that why it's hush-hush?
When you confront physicists with it, if it is private, the physicist would indeed feign surprise, and they would say very sympathetic, and well, yeah, of course, this looks like it. If the experiment is correct, they will keep that caveat. And then when they become as a group, they deny the experiment's validity because it has to be wrong.
But how about if it's repeated 2,000 times, you said?
I know. It is repeated and repeated and repeated, and repeated in 24 different laboratories by 24 different groups. So it is a little tough, but this is what physicists do today. Even experimental data cannot. It just like the creationists. You can show them millions of fossil data, but you will convince them that there is actually evolution. The
Yes, that's
scientists have been
fascinating.
exactly like that. They're ostriches. I mean, they put their head under the sand, and nothing can ever show them that there is anything here.
So when you ask them, then what is that? Then what do they say?
Well, if you talk to them one to one, as I said,
You could
neurophysiologists,
listen.
physicists, chemists, biologists, one to one, they are all very sympathetic. They
Hmm.
all say, yeah, yeah, this should obviously, if it is true, they keep that caveat, if it is true. But of course, they will claim that how can I know if it is true because I haven't looked into the details of the experiment. I don't have the
Ah, I see. Got
people
it.
who do have the expertise, like the neurophysiologists, they say, yeah, yeah, let me go home, I'll examine it. I will examine it thoroughly and see what happens.
Mm.
But they never write you back.
Okay, so then, okay, so this is how, so when you discovered, my gosh, I feel this disintegration between my person, like what's important to me and what's meaningful to the actual work that I'm doing as a physicist. And when you discovered, and you actually took the time to look at the quantum physics and study that, you thought, oh my gosh, wow, there's this other realm of reality that I didn't even know existed. And then what? Then
That's
what happened?
that's the point. So what I decided that okay, it is not that everybody is dancing with joy with my discovery, but the discovery is true because when you have a creative experience, part of the fun of the experience is that you know it is true. There's a gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that this is true.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, experiments came almost immediately. Jacobo Greenberg Zilberbaum, who is the Mexican neurophysiologist who did the first this transfer potential experiment that I described to you, within a year of my publication of the book, his experiments, we wrote a paper that was published the following year. The book was published in 1993. The experimental result, in which he put even my name because I was the theoretical interpreter
Yeah.
as one of the authors. So we had our paper published on the data,
Mm-hmm.
1994. Still no acceptance. And
Uh-huh.
then I realized that the paradigm of Newtonian physics is much more entrenched than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also geared down and realized that we have to not only apply it to quantum physics, but also apply it to where it counts, psychology and biology. So I first did
Mm-hmm.
the psychology problem, integration of science and spirituality. There is a branch of psychology which is spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
called transpersonal psychology, and
Mm-hmm.
now you have another spiritual psychology called positive psychology. So both of these branches have been interested in my work. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the first acceptance among scientific community.
Oh,
See,
okay.
this is valid because psychologists in that group were accepting it.
And why do you think they accepted it? Is it because, like in your book, Quantum Economics, you talk about, Jung had the idea of the conscious and the unconscious. So is it because they had this map of reality that they could go, aha, this actually validates my map of reality, so I can say, aha, that explains what's happening? Why do you think the psychologist said
Right.
yes?
I even was invited to teach at a graduate school on depth psychology because of that. Because depth psychologists, the psychologists who believe in the unconscious, they automatically automatically saw the importance of my work because it establishes the unconscious as a solid part of our ontological existence, of our theoretical metaphysical existence.
Right. Yeah, they could, for them, in some ways, it provided a theoretical model to explain the unexplainable.
Explain the unconscious, which has been unexplicable. So,
Interesting.
experimental data again confirms the existence of unconscious. For since 1970, we actually had experimental data for the unconscious, but still there was no theory of it. And
Oh,
so, what
oh.
it's a scientific theory of it? Of course, personal psychologist was borrowing from spiritual tradition to find some theory for the unconscious, but my work was the first scientific work to show that unconscious is real.
Ah.
So indeed, but of course there is enormous pressure on these guys. I'm remembering that this place where I used to teach, all of a sudden, they were no longer interested.
Hmm.
So I knew, it's like a sort of, you remember when Joe McCarthy used to be a dominant figure in American politics?
Right.
So people had this communist. If you
Right.
discover any communistic leaning, you're cut off.
Oh, I see. All of a sudden they had no funding. You weren't allowed to speak anymore.
I really experienced that. So
Okay, I get.
only I was not allowed to teach there in this
Wow.
place, but all the faculty, all of a sudden, nobody was answering my email.
Oh, wow, you're a heretic. Oh my God. Okay, and how about religions? Do religions like do religious folks listen to your stuff and say, yes, because it's actually the bridge that they're looking for to say that there is a God, that there is some divine force that's actually governing us as human beings, and it's about, listening, tuning in, having a relationship with God or the non-local unconscious. Do religious people embrace your ideas?
Religious people still do, to their credit, but again, not the Christians. I even because I am really practically a devotee of Jesus the Christ,
Yeah.
because he is as much of a teacher for me as Buddha is, and as the Hindu teachers in which tradition I was born, as they are.
Hmm.
Um, so I have always been respectful to his teachings, and I often quote his teaching because let's face it. I mean,
Yeah.
I live in America, which is by and large
Christian, yeah.
still 60% Christian, and so I respect that tradition very much. So I even had an appendix in my second book on integration of science and spirituality called The Visionary Window. I even had an appendix. No, sorry, it's not in that book. It's in God is Not Dead, my
Hmm.
third book on science and
Hmm.
spirituality. So in that book, there was an appendix called Quantum Physics and the Teachings. I expected that I'll get many emails from many Christians saying that, oh, this is so wonderful. You
Yeah.
have done this. I mean, locally, I was getting some support. But nationally, with email, one person was very enthusiastic. He was so enthusiastic, in fact, he presented my name to the Templeton Foundation as for the candidate for the Templeton Prize. So that was very gratifying. But you know what? He tried it through his congregation, and he could not get the congregation to move. So after a month, he writes back to me and says in a sort of apologetic way that, well, I still submitted, but now it has much less chance of going through because the congregation is not approving it.
Why don't they approve of it? Why
So
do Christians have issues with it? In your own experience, what do you think is happening?
uh, because it does not embrace Jesus as the teacher. Christians believe as Jesus is the one and only teacher of spirituality. Other religions don't count.
Okay, got it.
So
Okay, so they were upset because you're saying that there's not
quantum
a
physics
white bearded.
physics cannot, obviously, no physics can ever. Science would not be science if they said one man is it.
Oh, I see. So it's like, is Jesus this white bearded individual in the sky is the person who's doing this, and you're telling me that some non-local consciousness, like what's that all about? That seems heretic. Is that so? You're a heretic in that world too.
That was true. And surprise of surprise, generally speaking, Hindu mystics, because Hinduism is more mystical,
Right? Yeah.
generally speaking, they were supportive initially. But the staunch Hindus, that's a different story. They do not support because they again have the same problem as Christians have with Jesus. They have their respective, like Krishna or some other Shiva, and
Oh,
that's it. They're stuck with that.
well, because it.
Even the Buddhist community, surprise of surprises, although individually, again, the reception is fantastic. I have been to Buddhist
Yeah.
teaching situations and taught, and I've talked to Buddhists personally. Everybody says, wonderful, wonderful. I have met Dalai Lama, and everywhere the reception is good. However, when it comes to delivering, they too have hesitation because I don't embrace Buddhism as the one and only. And also
Oh my God, that's just so irritating.
Islam. So
Okay, that is fascinating because in both models where it's either the scientific community where you are only there you're saying there's two realities, which is a threat because you're saying that there's two realities and they only believe in one, or the religious groups, whether it's Hindu, Buddhist, or Christian, where you're saying it's not one God but many. these ideas are so threatening to the original constructs of what they believe in that they cannot go there. I think that's
They
fascinating.
hesitate to go there. Although in the esoteric tradition, the philosophies all agree. I must also mention that because people might get the wrong impression that there is lack of understanding at the deeper level of religions. There really are Christians, lots of them, in fact, who really know what I'm talking about. And
Right.
they completely agree with me about quantum reality. There is only one and only consciousness. And whatever name you call God, you are talking about the same thing, roughly a different side of the elephant, that's all. But
Yeah.
but it is God, no question. There are three characteristics that I gave to God in the book God is Not Dead. God is, there is just this causal power,
Hmm.
and that causal power is common in every religion. Every religion talks about a causal power outside of material causality.
Hmm.
So that's common in all religions.
Right. When that's maps to the quantum physics idea of non-local consciousness, there's something that's governing
Correct.
the
Non-local.
thing that you can't explain, right? These are things that define the material world.
Some religions shy away a little, call it ineffable. But even in Judaism, if you read, Judaism says that it's ineffable. But in Judaism, if you read Kabbalah, you'll find that they talk about ineffable quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it's not ineffable. It can be talked about, except you have to be careful because it's not dual. You can talk about it, and it's impossible to think unity when you are situated in a split world.
Right.
Duality exists. It's tricky to talk about, but we can always talk about tricky stuff. We know the way to do it. This is what makes us human beings. We can see, we can use metaphors to talk about that which cannot be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So all religions have suitable metaphor to talk about, like the metaphor that is used in Christianity for this non-local reality is transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
It's a metaphor. The word
Mm.
transcendence conveys the metaphor so well that I'm sure that all Christian teachers, beginning with Jesus, knew about it.
Right.
And certainly, St. Augustine, it's clear that he knew about it.
Right.
It is clear that St. Francis knew about it. So there's no doubt. You look at Kabbalah, again, the teachers of Kabbalah knew about it. You look at Vedanta, Hindu, they knew about it.
Yeah.
Buddhists talk about nothingness, obviously that's same thing,
Right.
same non-local reality.
Yeah.
So there's no question. Even Islam, which we today some people are avowed against Christian because of the violent sect of Muslim violent sect of Islam. But even Islam in the esoteric level, the Sufis, full of this idea that there is only that one reality.
Yeah.
There are Sufi writings, great philosophers, in fact, in Sufism, who all talk wonderfully about this
Yeah.
what we call quantum reality.
It's sad. It's sad, but I think that people can't change until they're ready for it, and they're not ready for it. Some people are ready for it. Some people are ready for it if it's called a different term that they feel comfortable with. I mean, it's quite sad because the power and the information is quite empowering at saying that we are co-creators with God, and as human beings we have the ability with our choices to shape our destiny. I mean, that's like super exciting. But I can
Yeah,
see it's also
and
threatening.
you see it so clearly because you said, okay, we have choice, we have the destiny in our hands. That's the other point where religions will shy away, the popular level of religion.
Yeah.
This is clearly esoteric understanding that God is us only at a deeper level. It's
Hmm.
higher consciousness of human beings.
Hmm.
But you try to tell that to a run-of-the-mill Christian who lives in Montana? No way.
Yeah.
You
It's too
tell it to a
threatening.
run-of-the-mill Hindu who lives in an Indian village? No way.
Yeah, it's pompous. How can you think that you are God, that you are part
Right,
of God, and that you are
right,
part of this non-local?
right.
I see. Okay, so I get it. Like I get why. What's interesting is that quantum physics is actually the integrative point in when spirituality and science can actually be integrated, and that there are no holes anymore. But yet it's threatening because it questions the fundamental principles and foundations that we've already built. So it kind of questions our foundation.
Yeah, even without realizing that religions sooner or later have to face up with the fact that there is this diametrically opposite worldview, who denigrate spirituality completely, namely
Yeah.
scientific materialism as the establishment science.
Yeah.
So, even when they see that this is giving us a wonderful opportunity to come to the mainstream back again, because look at today, average American, what do they do? They're stuck. Because on one hand, when they go to church, they are taught one about this other reality, and then when they go to school or when they go to college or when they go to their job, they find the reality which is completely different, which
Right.
is that every
Yeah.
matter of
Yes.
physical interaction.
Well, it's just like you were saying when that brought you to this work to begin with, right? You're at your work. It's all about science, measurements, what's material, and it's like, and everything is an object of which you're relating to, which is completely different than maybe when you were raised as a Hindu. It's about love and compassion and all these different things. So it's like, I don't understand how these two things integrate into a personal, meaningful thing. And here's an answer, but people
Yes.
aren't ready for it, sadly.
And if we really integrate it, notice this. Let me talk about the other two areas where spiritual traditions completely agree with each other. The second one, religions even completely agree. The second one is, first one is about this force, extra force, downward causation,
God,
extra causality. The second
non-local
one is
consciousness.
the
Yeah.
existence of subtle body,
Hmm.
the existence of more than the physical. This is every religion agrees that there is more to us, more to human beings than just the physical material body.
Right. Yeah.
And religions agree that there is a vital body in the Kabbalah, in the Vedanta, in all traditions. Body, mind in Christianity, body, mind, soul, spirit.
Hmm.
Body is physical, mind is mental, mind, thought.
Hmm.
Then soul is what we call now supramental or archetypal. That's another word that is used. Stuff like love, beauty, justice,
Hmm.
truth. Those are the archetypes of the soul. And spirit.
Right.
Spirit is the overwhelming ground of being that we are
Right.
already talking about, quantum consciousness. They omit vital energy, but Christianity knew about vital energy too.
Hmm.
William Blake talks about energy is eternal delight. Now, here is the surprise for you. Blake was an 18th century poet. The word energy was co opted by physics in 1837, in the 19th century, not in the 18th century.
Wow.
So Blake was not talking about energy in the physical sense. He's talking about the energy that we feel in our body,
Hmm. Prana.
vital energy.
Yeah. Prana, life energy,
Yes,
animus mundi, whatever you want to call it. Chi. This is what you call vital energy.
exactly. Prana, chi,
Whatever you
ki,
want to
all
call.
these terms that have been used in the East for millennia. So that's another agreement. And the third agreement, of course, is the one that is the most important for our society, which, if forgotten, will completely destroy our civilization as we know it. The third one is that we need spiritual values to live by. We
Hmm.
have to have love, beauty, justice, truth, goodness, all these things, abundance, self, all these archetypes recognized and must become part of our discovery exploration process. If we don't do it, civilization is, as we know it, is ruined, because this is what makes us civilized. Imagine if we are not more loving today than we were 2000 years ago. Can you even imagine what life was like? In those days when you can be robbed anytime, there was no law, nothing, and nothing to protect you. Now, how did we come up with this society where such a thing is unthinkable?
Hmm.
That in America, we sometimes forget. In America, even 100 years ago, if you went to the West, anybody could pull a gun and kill you.
Hmm.
It doesn't happen now. I
Hmm.
have walked through Texas, and indeed, nobody killed me.
Right.
But that was not true 100 years ago.
So you're saying in terms of, and these are some ideas that you have in your book, Quantum Economics, and you talk about that it's really important for us to understand the subtle energies and these higher values. So these are three critical things to understand for the fate of the universe. I mean, I think is what you're saying, right? Whether it's economics or anything. I mean, if we don't understand subtle energies, of which there is a place of that in quantum physics, right? There's this idea of subtle energies and higher values. Where is that in the quantum physics world?
Well, so now quantum physics world, I mean, if you're talking about the physicists, most of them are also humanists, so not strictly speaking scientific materialists.
Okay.
So, this is the saving grace of it. You can talk about the subtle stuff, even at the university. I have gone to Princeton and talked
Right.
about subtle stuff, and it's okay. It's okay there. Nobody proselytizes you because you talk about subtle stuff.
Right.
But you can talk about it in a specific context. I had to go to the religious studies department to talk about it. No physics department will allow me to talk about it. They would say immediately, "Oh, we don't want to hear it because this is not physics."
Right, because you can't measure love
Well, you
or
can actually
compassion.
measure it now.
Well, that's probably
Not
true. You
that
probably
you can actually measure. This is what I was saying. The surprising thing is that we have learned to measure it. We are a little bit behind the times, that's all.
yeah.
Learn to measure these things. So we can today, there are apparatuses which will measure energy in your heart chakra when you feel love.
Yeah.
So it's measurable. It's not that it's unmeasurable, just as consciousness is now measurable because that's the domain through which we have instant communication. It's measurable, but still we don't believe it. The problem is the belief systems are so entrenched in the two camps. Either you are a scientific materialist or you are a religion fanatic. The two cannot meet. And quantum physics is telling, look, you can meet. Here I am, I'm existing for 90 years. Acknowledge me and I can solve your problem. Nobody listens.
I just think it's sad and it's fascinating and it's understandable. I mean, what's understandable is that because I was thinking about why is your work, and I was just talking to Joe Dispenza. He was also on What the Bleep, and he's doing all this research where he's having people go into his workshops when they're going into a meditative experience and reaching this place of transcendence, and they have all these measurements. They're looking at their brain waves, they're looking at their heart waves, they're looking at energy, and they have neuroscientists going in and looking, observing the data and looking at the data and saying that person is having a seizure. And Dr. Joe would say, look at them. And he's like, no, that person's in ecstasy. Like, well, I can't explain this numerical data. And then he said, then they proceed to argue with him the
Yeah.
whole time because they can't understand what is happening with the data. And it just is an affront to their worldview. So I think I understand. I kind of understand because I think it's threatening to people want to have control in their lives, and they have fear, so they want to have control over the unknown. They want to know the unknown, and they want to have a model to control the unknown. Your thing is just like, what? Now there's this unknown thing that I don't know anything about, and it's scary to me.
That's it. You are so smart. That is it.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.